Hello, it's Shari here today, and I'm going to be making this fun pop-up card with the new A Little Sparkle mini stamp set. So this is the mini stamp set that is available for Black Friday, and it has this cute little unicorn in it and some very tiny little fairies. So I'm just going to start by stamping out my images. I'm using some Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink because I'm going to be doing some Copic coloring, and I am stamping on Neenah Solar White cardstock. So I'm going to stamp out this little unicorn twice, although I'm only going to use one of them. I just like to stamp things out twice just in case I mess up my coloring. And then I'm going to stamp out a bunch of the little fairies. There's two different fairies in this set. One is kind of facing straight at you, and then the other is facing to the side. So I'm just going to mix and match these in my card design so I have a little bit of variety, and I'll just color these in rainbow colors. So I'm going to do some super speedy coloring here, and it's pretty simple. I'm actually not doing any blending at all on this card. I'm just using some fun rainbow colors. I'm going to color the unicorn's tail and mane in rainbow colors. So I'm using some green, teal, and purple for his tail, and then I'm going to use some pink, orange, and yellow for the mane. And I'm just making each stripe its own color. Again, I'm not doing any blending on this particular card. I did do a little bit of blending, I guess, on the horn though. I used some yellow and then added a little bit of pink. I just wanted it to look slightly different than the yellow in the mane. And then for the body of the unicorn, I just kind of outlined it with a very pale brown color and just blended it out with a colorless blender. Other than that, I didn't do any other blending. So for the fairies, what I did was I picked a color for each fairy, and I picked a very pale shade of that color for the wings, and then I did the dress in a darker color of the same color family. So you can see there's a pale purple wing with a darker purple dress, same for the teal, and I just repeated that for all the fairies, and I did one in every color. For their hair, I just kind of did a variety of colors. I did some blonde, I did some brown, and then I did different skin tones according to what their hair color was. So these are super simple. Again, there's no blending. These are so small that there's not a lot of space for blending either. So really quick coloring on these, and you can make a whole bunch of them and fill a card with fairies. Now there is a die set that matches this stamp set, and I'm just going to clip apart these dies, and I'm going to use those to cut out my images. I just cut out the unicorn and the fairies. I just held those in place with some low-tack tape. There are dies that also cut out the set of stars and the wand, but I didn't use those in this card. Now that my pieces are cut out, I wanted to add just a slight shimmer to the tail and the mane of the unicorn, and I also did the same to the wings of all the fairies. So this is a Spectrum Noir clear sparkle pen, and it just leaves this light layer of shimmer. I like to do this after I've cut out my images because if I do it before, a lot of times the tape pulls it off. Now I have a piece of 12 by 12 paper from the Really Rainbow collection, and this is the striped paper. I'm going to use the pop-up box die and cut out two pieces. Then you can see I'm putting some double-sided tape onto that little flap, and that's where I'm going to connect these two pieces to create my box. So I'll just trim off the excess that goes past the edge of that little flap. And then I'm going to use my bone folder to make my creases nice and sharp. So I'm going to fold in the flap, and I'm also going to fold the side of the box. And then when it comes to the flaps on the top, I'm going to fold them in the opposite direction. And I'll do the same to the other piece. It is good to use a 12 by 12 sheet of paper for this box because there's usually a pattern on both sides. And with this die, you're going to see the inside of the box just as much as you're going to see the outside. Now I'm going to put these two pieces together just on one side to start with. And I'm using my grid mat just to make sure that they're lined up nice and straight. And you can see they're going to fold flat just like that. Now I'm going to speed things up a little bit here just so this video isn't too long. I have that die that cuts out the inside piece, and I've cut 3 pieces from just white cardstock. I've folded the edges in, and I'm just putting double stick tape on all the ends. Then I'll go in with my scissors and trim off the excess. So now that I have those pieces ready, I am going to use some of the pixie dust glitter cardstock. I've cut it to be 3 1/4 wide, and that is the width of these pieces. And now I'm going to use this to cut some clouds, and I'm going to put those on those inserts. And that's going to build the base for my scene. So I'm just going to lay that on there and just figure out where I want that stitch cloud border die to go. And I'm trying to place it in such a way that it's close to the bottom and I don't have any clouds sticking up too far. This is going to be the frontmost piece, and I'm using the smallest cloud for this one. Now I'm going to hold that in front of my next piece of glitter cardstock to cut, and I'm going to take the next largest cloud, and I'm not going to make it taller necessarily, but I am going to figure out where to place it so that it has hills where the one in front of it has valleys. So you can see that that cloud in the center is going to kind of pop up where the clouds behind it go down, just to give it a little variety and so it doesn't look the same. I'm going ahead and glue these pieces on to these inserts. I do have a third one to cut, but I just went ahead and glued these on. Because there's no sense in them not being glued at this point. But then I'm going to go ahead and cut the third one, and I will cut the back one with the largest of those stitch cloud border dies. I don't want to make this back one too terribly tall because I'm going to do a little rainbow on the very back panel. So this is the last panel, and once I have all these glued to those insert pieces, I want to make sure that they're all the right width. I did have to take my scissors at one point and trim off just a little sliver of that glitter cardstock just so that it didn't stick out past where the fold of those inserts was. And then I'm going to place them inside my box. So I'm just going to do one side first, and I'll show you how this box sort of comes together with these inserts. And this is a good way to make sure your box will lay flat. If you go ahead and make the box and then put these inserts in, sometimes it's not completely flat. So I'm going to start with the front one, and I'm just putting it slightly in from the outside face of the box, just doing this one side, and then I will fold it over to the left side and lay it flat. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the middle piece, and I'm just going to set it back a little bit from that piece that's in the front. And then you can lay them on each other, kind of flip them back and forth, just to make sure the bottoms are sort of lined up, and that way you know that you've sort of got it straight enough. Since these are clouds, it's not going to be very obvious, but if you were doing straight lines, it might be. Now that they're all in there on one side, I can flip them back to the other side and pull off all the adhesive liner so that my sticky is showing. And once I have all that liner paper pulled off, I'll just fold my box over and basically just pick up those pieces. And I also need to do the other flap in my box, which I forgot to do. So I'm going to pull that off as well and go ahead and close up that box completely. So you can see now it lays perfectly flat, and I have those little cloud inserts in there. Now to sort of create my scene, I'm going to put my unicorn on that center piece. And I'm just using liquid glue because it sticks really well to this glitter cardstock. but it also gives you a chance to sort of move it around a little bit if it's not perfect placement. Now for my fairies, I've cut some very thin strips of acetate from this piece of acetate here. These are really long pieces, so I'm going to cut them in half. I've got 3 here, so I'm going to make them into 6. I don't need them to stick up too far, because if they stick up too far, they will stick out of the top of the box when it's folded flat, and it won't fit in a standard envelope like it should. So now I've got 6 little pieces of acetate, and this is where I'm going to put my fairies. So to do this, I'm going to use some micro glue dots. These are really tiny glue dots. But I want to make sure that my glue dot is not bigger than my acetate, because then when my card is closed, these are going to stick to the inside. So that's why I'm using these little bitty guys. So I'm just putting a glue dot at the very end of that piece of acetate, and then I will put my fairy right on that glue dot. And you can see now she floats in the air off the acetate. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that to all my little fairies. So I have all these fairies ready to go, and then I can figure out the placement in my card. Now I'm using a very thin adhesive runner, and I'm just going to place these fairies on the back side of my clouds. So you're not going to see that acetate, it's going to be hidden. And I'm using the adhesive runner. You could also use the glue dots again, but liquid glue I find does not stick to this acetate quite as well. You want something that sticks immediately, otherwise you're going to be holding this piece in place forever waiting for the glue to dry. So I'm just varying where my colors are, mixing my cools and warms, and varying the heights of these little fairies as they fly around up in the clouds. I'm also making sure that none of them stick out to the left or the right too far, so that when my card is closed, they're not in the way of the folds and it closing. So now that I have all my little scene set, I'm going to work on the panels that go on the outside. I've used the watercolor Wishes paper, and I've just cut those panels with the die that comes in the pop-up box die set. And I'm going to use the yellow one on the front and stamp my sentiment. And the sentiment in this set says, "Hope your day sparkles." I wanted to fill the space around the sentiment a little bit more, so I'm using the little sparkles that come in this set just to stamp around it and fill it completely. There are different sizes in the set, which is kind of nice. There's a group of 3 as well as 3 different sizes. So now that I have that on there, I can adhere that to that front flap of my card. And then I've got some pink ones here. These are the little ones. Those are going to go on the sides. These are also from the Watercolor Wishes papers. And then you can see that other pink one there. I was going to put that on the back. I decided to go with the blue one I had cut so that it looks more like a sky. Now for the rainbow in the background, you can see I have cut out 6 different colors with the rainbow die here. And then I'm just going to put those together to create my rainbow on the back. I'm going to have a lot of pieces left over, but I can use those for a later project and create some other rainbows. So I'm starting with the pink and the largest arch there. I'm using some liquid glue just on the left side of it, because the part that's hanging off, I'm just going to trim off when I get all these pieces on. So I'm going to speed things up a little bit, super speedy, and you can see I'm just going to work my way down. So with the orange one, I'm just going to use the second largest arch, the third largest arch of the yellow, and so on and so forth. And I will keep these pieces and use them on a future project with some different rainbows. You could also cut all these pieces from white and color them with ink if you wanted to. So now that I've got all those pieces in place, I can just take my scissors and trim off the excess. And now I have a little rainbow going off the side of my sky. To finish things off and give a little more detail to those side panels, I cut some little stitch clouds from that same Pixie Dust glitter cardstock. I'm just going to put those on those panels. This ties in with the clouds I've already put on inside. And then for the bottom of my rainbow, I wanted to finish it off. I'm using one of the simple cloud dies, and I'm just going to cut it along the straight edge of a piece of that glitter cardstock so that I can adhere it right at that fold. So now it looks like my rainbow ends in a cloud. And then to finish it off, I added one more little fairy to balance off that back panel. And then there is my finished card with a lot of rainbow and sparkle going on. So here is another look. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.